Guys, as you know, President Trump about 2 weeks ago or so came out and said that all federal workers who have been working from home are going to have to return to the office full time. And when the pandemic started about 5 years ago or so, a little less than 5 years, when the pandemic started, there were a lot of federal workers that were told to stay home like everybody else. Now, when everybody went back to work after the pandemic in 23, 24, a lot of federal workers stayed at home. Now, OPM, Office of Personnel Management, has come out and said 50% of all federal workers telework from home. President Trump did an executive order in the first few days of his presidency that said, you got to get back into the office as a federal worker, all federal workers. Well, here's the problem with that, guys. You have a lot of federal workers that were hired during the pandemic as telework employees. They were hired with the notion and idea that they were going to work from home 24 hours a day. The other issue is that you have a lot of people that were hired like that and now live more than, an hour or 2 hours outside of a federal government facility. So you have a lot of workers that now have to make a decision about, okay, wait a minute, how do I get to work and where am I going to be going to work at? A lot of federal workers don't know what office to go into because some of them have never been into a federal office. So behind the scenes in terms of the federal government, there's probably a lot of confusion, a lot of nervousness, a lot of people that are panicking, not sure what to do. How do we get back to work? When do we get back to work? How's this going to work? What's the space like? Is there enough space for all of us to fit into an office here or there? There's a lot going on at this point, and a real reason for a lot of people to be a little bit confused and a little bit nervous. So President Trump said, hey, you got to all come back into the office. And then President Trump and his team said, look, if you don't come back to the office, you don't want to come into the office, that's cool. We'll give you a buyout. We'll pay you to pretty much not come back into the office. So this is sort of what the next offer was. After the executive order for everybody to return to the office, the next step was saying, hey, you can stay at home and not return to the office and leave federal government work. You can resign, but we'll pay you about 7 months of your salary while you sit at home, right? And if you want to get other employment while you're sitting at home, feel free to do that. So my question to you guys is this. If you were a federal government worker, would you take that buyout that said, you don't have to return to work, no big deal, you can resign, and hey, we'll even pay you for 7 months, right? Would you take that offer if you were a federal worker? Let me know in the comments below what you would do. And if you're a federal worker, what do you think about it? And what do you think about the buyout in general, even if you're not a federal worker? It's something to think about, guys, because for a lot of people, especially if you're almost ready to retire or you're close to retirement, it may be something to strongly consider. But if you're a person that just got hired onto the federal government, or you're in kind of middle of the road, you're about 15 years in or so, maybe it's not something that you should consider. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes right now in terms of all federal government agencies, all people that work for the federal government, whether you're at the lower end of the level, you're in the mid-level, you're management and above. There's a lot to think about for a lot of people. And then what's the next round of maybe trying to trim this down? President Trump's team said we expect that about 5 to 10% of all federal government workers are going to take this buyout, or at least all the ones that were given the opportunity. Remember, the post office workers and the military, they were excluded from this offer, this buyout. But of the 2 million people that received the opportunity to get the buyout, Trump's team expects that 5 to 10% will take it. About 3 or 4 days ago, when I last checked, about 20,000 people had already taken the buyout. And more recently, I read somewhere where it said nearly 60,000 people have taken the buyout. So that's a substantial amount of people that has said, you know what, I'm going to take the buyout, cut my losses, and leave. Now, there's been lots of unions that have come out and said, hey, don't take the buyout. There's also been unions that are fighting and taking this to court to see if it's actually legal. Now, if you do the math, 20,000 people is about 1% of the 2 million workers who had an opportunity to take the buyout. And 60,000 people, if 60,000 people took the buyout, that's about, I think, 3%. Now, I may be wrong on the math, but I think that's about 3% of 2 million people. So this past Friday was actually the deadline to accept the buyout. Now, a federal judge jumped in and said, let's extend this thing. And so now the buyout deadline, I think, is tomorrow or the next day. We'll see. There's more coming up on this thing, guys. There's a long way to go. And I think this may be the first of another buyout that may come down the road. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. If the Trump administration doesn't see 5 to 10% of the federal workers that were offered the buyout taking the buyout, then there may be some other measures that take place in order to get the number of resignations that they want to see, that 5 to 10% number. This is all part of this whole cost-cutting, Department of Government efficiency move to actually say, hey, we're going to cut some of the cost of the government and we're going to cut a big chunk of labor to help do it. And hopefully, America is going to be able to manage its systems and do what it needs to do with the smaller workforce. So we'll have to see what happens. Hey, it is what it is. You got to do what you got to do. And hey, there's a lot of people that are confused, hurting, mad, upset, scared, nervous, panicking, trying to figure out, is their job going to be there tomorrow? There's been other agencies that they're claiming have already been slashed and cut and gone and done, right? USAID, Department of Education. So some of these places, some of these departments and things have already been sort of dissolved or are in the process of being dissolved. We know there's litigation, there's lawsuits and things like that are happening. My personal opinion is that instead of everybody having to go back into the office, it might have been a better idea to say, how do we just sell some of the empty office space? Because I think production has been pretty good, at least in the agencies that I'm aware of. Production seems like it's at the same level of when you actually had everybody in the office. I mean, what say you? Do you work better in the office or do you work better at home? Like, everybody's different, right? But one way or the other, all federal workers are now having to go back to the office. Or if you don't want to go in, you got the option to resign and take the buyout. Take your salary for 7 months and get your salary and stay at home. Work another job if you want. Begin another career if you want. Start a hobby. Start a side hustle. You got that option if you take this buyout. Be paying attention to what say it and what say you. I want to know what you would do. Would you have taken the buyout? Or just give me your thoughts in general. It's an ongoing situation. And there's a lot of federal workers that are nervous, that are panicking, that are upset about this whole buyout issue. The best person who's going to take care of the old you is the young you. Guys, take care of yourself and take care of other people. Until the next video, peace.